to Santa Cruz Reads. My name is Sherry Scold, and I'm the president of the Friends of the Santa Cruz Library. Today is the first day of the month of October's Big Read, which is a grant celebrating the writings of Edgar Allan Poe. This grant, which is funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, was written by volunteers of the Friends. I'd like to recognize and thank Jory Post, Mary Nelson, Teal Messer, and Phyllis Taylor for an incredible job and one that succeeded in winning the grant for this city. We have a wonderful month ahead of us of absolutely fabulous activities, and the person responsible for all of this is the one I'd like to introduce next, and that's Janice O'Driscoll, the Manager of Programs and Partnerships. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you and welcome. Something like this doesn't happen just with a few people. It has been remarkable what kinds of partnerships we have been able to form in order to have the first Santa Cruz Reads. And I want to tell you about some of them. I'm sure you've noticed the wonderful posters that are up in the front, up here, in back of me. Maybe you've already seen the program we did on community TV and saw the poster there. All of that artwork and design work was done by Studio Holiday, which is a design firm on the west side of Santa Cruz over on Swift Street. Ted Holiday is the owner of the firm, and the chief creative person there is Conrad Altman, and they're responsible for these wonderful graphics that have worked and will continue to work all through the month. The Museum of Art and History is a partner. They're going to be a venue for two of our events, and we're going to go along on the tour of Evergreen Cemetery, and you might have a surprise that you're not expecting there, so you might want to think about doing that one. The Santa Cruz City Schools. One of the exciting things about this program is the close partnership we have with the schools in this event. All of the children are going to think about Poe in some way in this next month. Several of them are going to be reading some of his works. And we have Marianne James and Veronica Sahaya to thank for that. It's been wonderful. We have a wonderful close relationship, and so you'll be reading, the kids will be reading, and we'll all be talking. Bookshop Santa Cruz. Bookshop Santa Cruz is helping us by providing some of the prizes for the writing contest that I'll tell you about later, but they're also supporting the discussion groups. We have 10 discussion groups over the course of this next month, and every time you go, you'll be eligible to join a raffle and win prizes donated by Bookshop Santa Cruz, and that's at every single group. So be sure to check out those sessions. They're not only interesting, but you might come out a winner. Community TV of Santa Cruz County. They're here today. You can all see that. They produce this wonderful half-hour program for us to help us get the word out about Big Read. They're filming this event, the finale on November 3rd, the Willing Suspension of Disbelief Theater in the middle of October, and also when Poe himself is coming to Santa Cruz the first week of November. You might not have realized that, and they're going to film him so we can prove it. So all of these partners have helped us put together a month that we are all very excited about. Now, you can't do something like this without a proclamation. And we have more than one proclamation. We have lots of whereases. And so now is time for a whereas. And to do that, I'm going to introduce the library director, Teresa Landers. And I want to tell you, yes, she does always dress like this.
that was made for standing at lecterns. I will tell you that this proclamation has been proclaimed throughout the county. The County of Santa Cruz, the City of Capitola, the City of Scotts Valley, the City of Santa Cruz, and of course our very own Library Joint Powers Board has proclaimed this month as Big Read or Santa Cruz Reads. And this is important because the library system does serve the entire county, so with the exception of Watsonville. So without further ado, here's the proclamation. Whereas the Big Read is an initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA, designed to restore reading to the center of American culture and encourage reading for pleasure and enlightenment. And whereas the NEA presents the Big Read in partnership with the Institute of Museum and Library Services and Arts Midwest, and whereas the Big Read, which began as a pilot project in 2006 with 10 communities, has since expanded to include 951 grants as of June 2010, and now brings together partners across the country to participate in this important program. And whereas, locally, the Friends of the Library, in partnership with the Santa Cruz Public Libraries, received a Big Read grant for the works of author Edgar Allan Poe, and whereas the goal of the Big Read is to have the entire Santa Cruz community reading, viewing, listening, and talking about the works of Edgar Allan Poe from October 1 through November 3rd, 2011, and whereas to encourage broad participation locally in the Big Read event, staff at the Santa Cruz Public Libraries, volunteers with Friends of the Library, local school districts, the Museum of Art and History, community television, and local businesses and groups will host a number of activities and events highlighting the work and life of Edgar Allan Poe, which will include book discussion groups, reading Edgar Allan Poe, mystery author events, and a Condor education program. And whereas on November 3rd, 2011, the Big Read will culminate with a grand finale at the Seymour Center, where Edgar Allan Poe impersonator Duffy Hudson and author Laurie King will be the featured guests. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim October 1 through November 3rd, 2011 as the Big Read Month in the City of Santa Cruz and the County of Santa Cruz, and encourage residents to participate in the many events focusing on the incredible life and work of Edgar Allan Poe.
Once upon a midnight jury, while I pondered weakly and weary over a minute while I'm married, suddenly they are happy, as someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor I letter, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more.
So you see, we can expect many spontaneous recitings of Poe all month. Santa Cruz is blessed with many wonderful writers, and we are so pleased that several of them are joining us for our month celebration of Big Read. It's my pleasure to introduce someone I actually met through her mother. Mary Richardson was a wonderful member of the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries in the branch that I first worked at, Aptos branch. And I can remember when I first came to Santa Cruz and started working at Aptos, Mary would keep telling me about her daughter who was a writer and wrote mysteries and had some exciting ideas about Sherlock Holmes and a woman, and I thought, what? And here we go. It was Laurie King's mother. And it so pleasures me to remember when The Beekeeper's Apprentice came out, and now here we are with The Pirate King just coming out just very recently. Laurie is going to talk to us about what a 21st century mystery writer has to say about a 19th century mystery writer. It is my very great pleasure to introduce Laurie King.
Yeah, Mom would love this. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'm always glad to take a look at Poe because it reminds me of the tradition I come in. I write a series that basically steals some of the best material out there. I write a series which has, among other things, Sherlock Holmes in it. And it's always interesting to look at what went before that. When I'm looking at the detective stories, for example, of Poe. And one of the things that I was interested in is a lovely collection of the portable Edgar Allan Poe, the barely portable Edgar Allan Poe. And the editor divides his stories up into predicaments, bereavements, antagonisms, mysteries, and grotesqueries. And I love the idea of having that be your oeuvre. I think I need to focus more on the grotesqueries and the antagonisms. But some of the things that strike me when I'm reading the mysteries side, what Poe talked about as his tales of ratiocination, is how much, although people accuse me of stealing stuff, it's not original. Because when you look at the relationship between Arthur Conan Doyle and Edgar Allan Poe, you begin to see some very interesting threads going on there. So that in, for example, the Purloined Letter, which I'm sure you all know better than I, at Paris, just after dark one gusty evening in the autumn of 18, I was enjoying the twofold luxury of meditation and a meerschaum in company with my friend C. Auguste Dupin. Now, that was 1845. And in 1904, Conan Doyle writes almost exactly the same thing. It was a wild, tempestuous night towards the close of November. Holmes and I sat together in silence all the evening. He engaged with a powerful lens deciphering the remains of the original inscription upon a palimpsest, I deep in a recent treatise upon surgery. Another thing that you find in both writers is the rudeness towards the official police, which, you have to be careful when you're writing a modern time thing, but Conan Doyle could get away with it fine, and indeed Poe, who has the prefect come in. I will tell you in a few words, but before I begin, let me caution you that this is an affair demanding the greatest secrecy, and that I should probably lose the position I now hold were it known that I confided it to anyone. Proceed, said I. Or not, said Dupin. And Conan Doyle takes the same theme and turns it around by having the inspector say, "By George," cried the inspector, "how did you ever see that?" And Holmes answering, "Because I looked for it." And then you find this interesting little thing where you have Conan Doyle and Dupin, both of them tied together by Dupin's predecessor, who was an actual life criminal turned policeman. Now, these days we tend to go the other direction, but then criminals made great cops, named Vidocq. And Vidocq was the original, Dupin was a variation on him. And of him, Dupin says, Vidocq, for example, was a good guesser and a persevering man, but without educated thought. He erred continually by the very intensity of his investigations. He impaired his vision by holding the object too close. And Holmes saying, to Watson's saying, Holmes reminds him of Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin. Holmes rose and lit his pipe. I must take up pipe smoking, I really must. No doubt you think that you are complimenting me and comparing me to Dupin. Now, in my opinion, Dupin was a very inferior fellow. So, when I say rude things about Sherlock Holmes, there's a good tradition for it. But the fun things that I find, and when I'm writing, I look for some interesting twist of phrase that that can throw light or humor or some interesting twist into the conversation. And when it's Sherlock Holmes who does it, they call them Sherlock-isms, these aphorisms that that gives you a slight punch in the narrative, such as when Dupin says, there is such a thing as being too profound. And when Sherlock Holmes says, there is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact. Now, among the things that I just adore in Poe are his use of language. The poem that we just had flashed at us is one of those great examples. The rhythm of it has stuck with me. I think I memorized that in high school, and I can still recite quite a bit of that poem. The power of the rhythm and the words that Poe manages to get across. And you pick up pretty much anything in the collected works of Poe, and you find yourself reading it aloud, because it's really the kind of narrative that needs to be read aloud. It's the rhythm, the richness of the vocabulary. It's actually quite daunting on the page. When you look at a page of his short stories, you think, I'm not going to like this. It's just, there's not enough conversation in it. But when you start reading it aloud, you find yourself really getting into it, which I think is one of the goals that I can have with my narrative. Because when I look at the stuff that Poe has done, I was asked a couple of years ago by Mike Connolly to write a story for this collection that he did. It's called In the Shadow of the Master. Short stories and essays about Poe. And I found I could say nothing about him other than how he'd stolen all the good ideas. So, you know, I think that I can aim at having his vocabulary and his richness of recitation. My piece for Michael ends that I have to say it gets a person down when everything one writes is tainted with a whiff of the derivative. I'm thinking about moving out of crime fiction for a while, since with Poe in the field it's feeling a little crowded. Maybe I'll write poetry for a change. I've even started playing with some nice ideas about this gloomy bird and a lost lover. So I very much look forward to this month. I look much forward to rereading my way through the portable Edgar Allan Poe, and to seeing a fair number of you in November. Thank you very much for welcoming me.
You'll get a chance to hear Laurie again in the finale, November 3rd, when she and Poe are actually going to discuss writing together, so you don't want to miss that. Our next writer is Gary Young. He is the Poet Laureate of Santa Cruz County. He writes these marvelous poems about everyday life, and everyday life doesn't seem so everyday after you've read his poetry. He's going to be one of our discussion leaders in the Big Read, and he's been instrumental in designing the 2 writing contests that we're running this month, and you want to be sure and join that. We have contests for children and adults. I just thought I would put that plug in, and we have entry forms right there. It's my pleasure to introduce our Poet Laureate, Gary Young.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming out. Laurie spoke eloquently about the power of Poe orally. And as a poet, I think what makes Poe's poetry the most attractive is the music of it. He insisted that beauty was the fundamental and enduring object of, or goal at least, of poetry. And I think it's most clear in his poetry. The poems, I think, have endured because they're fun to read. For all of the crazy stuff that goes on in them, and there's plenty of that, they're also just a pleasure to hear, and they're a pleasure to read. And I think that's why we continue to read Poe after all this time. He uses, as we all know, these insistent rhymes, rhetorical devices of incantation and alliteration, and sort of a hypnotic repetition in his poems. He's always merging the delicate with the grotesque, corruption with the sublime, and the humorous and comic with the serious. Although in Poe's poems, sometimes you don't know which is which. They get confused a little bit sometimes. Rather than talk about Poe's poems, I'm going to read some of my favorite ones and make just a couple of comments on them. This first poem is called To One in Paradise. And you'll notice there's a little foreshadowing of the Raven where he says, "No more, no more, no more." Poe gets away with things like that. Very few poets can manage. This obsessiveness and just the queer locutions in some of his poetry, somehow he makes it work. To One in Paradise. Thou wast that all to me, love, for which my soul did pine. A green isle in the sea, love, a fountain and a shrine, all wreathed with fairy fruits and flowers, and all the flowers were mine. Ah, dream too bright to last. Ah, starry hope that didst arrive, but to be overcast. A voice from out the future cries, on, but o'er the past dim gulf my spirit hovering lies, mute, motionless, aghast. For alas, alas, with me the light of life is o'er. No more, no more, no more. You could go on and on with that. Such language holds the solemn sea to the sands upon the shore. Shall bloom the thunder-blasted tree, or the stricken eagle soar. And all my days are trances, and all my nightly dreams are where thy gray eye glances, and where thy footstep gleams. In what ethereal dances, by what ethereal streams. One of the things that I do love about Poe is that sometimes you feel like laughing at him in the middle of his most serious poems. And I think that's how he gets away with some of the grotesqueries and some of the more gruesome aspects in his work, is that there's a comic element always there, but it allows the seriousness to stand. It's a very odd thing. It's a poem called The City and the Sea. Lo, death has reared himself a throne in a strange city lying alone far down within the dim west, where the good and the bad and the worst and the best have gone to their eternal rest. Their shrines and palaces and towers, time-eaten towers that tremble not, resemble nothing that is ours. Around by lifting winds forgot, resignedly beneath the sky, the melancholy waters lie. No rays from the holy heaven come down on the long night time of that town, but light from out the lurid sea streams up the turrets silently, gleams up the pinnacles far and free, up domes, up towers, up kingly halls, up fanes, up Babylon-like walls, up shadowy, long-forgotten bowers of sculpted ivy and stone flowers, up and up many a marvelous shrine whose weathered friezes intertwine the veal, the violet, and the vine. Resignedly beneath the sky the melancholy waters lie, so blend the turrets and shadows there that all seem pendulous in air, while from a proud tower in the town death looks gigantically down. There open fanes and gaping graves, yawn level with the luminous waves, but not the riches there that lie in each idol's diamond eye, not the gaily jeweled dead tempt the waters from their bed, for no ripples curl, alas, along that wilderness of glass. No swellings tell what winds may be upon some far-off happier sea. No heavings hint that winds have been on seas less hideously serene. But lo, a stir is in the air. The wave, there is a movement there, as if the towers had thrust aside and slightly sinking the dull tide, as if their tops had feebly given a void within the filmy heaven. The waves have now a redder glow. The hours are breathing faint and low, and when amid no earthly moans, down, down that town shall settle hence, hell, rising from 1,000 thrones, shall do it reverence. This is one of Poe's most famous poems, The Conqueror Worm, a rather jaundiced view of human history. You've got to love a poem that can rhyme with human gore imbued with food. One of the things I think it's important to remember, especially when we do run across these rather grim images, is that Poe lived at a time that in which death was ever present and very real. He lost lovers, he lost family members, he lost friends, and this was a common and typical occurrence at this time. So although by 21st century eyes, some of his obsessions seem a little overwrought, at the time they were closer to a recognition of reality than of some sort of odd bent of personality. So, The Conqueror Worm. Lo, 'tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils and drowned in tears, sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets they who come and go, at bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings, invisible woe. That motley drama, oh, be sure it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased for evermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth into the selfsame spot, and much of madness and more of sin, and horror the soul of the plot. But see amid the mimic rout a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes with mortal pangs, the mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs in human gore imbued. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form the curtain, the funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy Man, and its hero, the conquering worm. When I was in college, Daniel Halpern, a critic and poet, put out a wonderful critical book, which I remember reading for a class. It was about Edgar Allan Poe, and it was titled Poe, 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 which I thought pretty much hit his subject. I'll read one more poem. It's The Lake, too. And it's another one of those poems that deliciously merges terror and delight, those two poles in Poe's work. In spring of youth, it was my lot to haunt of the wide world a spot the which I could not love the less. So lovely was the loneliness of that wild lake, with black rock bound and the tall pines that towered around. But when the night had thrown her pall upon the spot as upon all, and the mystic wind went by, murmuring in melody, then I would awake to the terror of the lone lake. Yet that terror was not fright, but a tremulous delight, a feeling not the jeweled mind could teach or bribe me to define, nor love, although the love were there thine. Death was in that poisonous wave, and in its gulf a fitting grave for him who thence could solace bring to his lone imagining, whose solitary soul could make an Eden of that dim lake. Thank you.
We know that words are very important to writers, but I learned when I was getting ready to put this month together that words and environment and atmosphere are very important to magicians. It makes sense. They have to set the stage, they have to use just the right words, they think about illusion. You know, person who's been very popular for many years at the Santa Cruz Public Libraries as a magician, Brent Gifford, you may know him as the Great Blindini, is also interested in Poe. And he's interested in the psychology of Poe, and he's going to explain to you the connection. Brent?
Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks, Janice, for inviting me to be part of this. I'm really actually I was doing a tearing down a display at the Central Library that was there from the Coastal Magicians Club, and I've been doing library shows here in Santa Cruz for 8 years now, for summer reading programs, some other special events. And Janice was like, "What do you know about Poe?" And I'm like, perfect. Poe is, as a magician, Poe is one of my favorite authors because you can take everything Poe wrote with a grain of salt or with a suspension of disbelief. And even though I can't see, my personal way of how I ingest Poe is audibly. I grew up, even before I lost my sight when I was 11, but even before that, I grew up in the woods of Maine, and families used to get together of a winter's evening in 3 or 4 families in a house and read. That was part of how I was brought up. And Poe was one of the best subjects to do that with. And I would still suggest from the standpoint of a hypnotherapist and a stage hypnotist and things like that for years, I would suggest if you really want to get Poe and you don't have somebody to read it with, that you actually physically get the paper book and read it by candlelight, and it will still scare the living crap out of you. I mean, it's just, that's how it goes. And that's actually what I'm doing as part of this big read. Is I'm not focusing so much on the reading per se as the physical ideomotor responses that you get by reading Poe. As you read Poe, that's kind of what happens is you get, here's a quick example. You take a lemon and you bite into a lemon. Everybody in the room just had a physical response to that. And Poe is the same way. Poe writes in the manner that you have a physical response and that you have a memory of for the rest of your life having read it. And it's amazing. Even little children who don't know Poe from Poe, they, oh man, kind of itchy. what it does. Oh, God. Ugh. Anyway, they don't know the difference. But if you say, "Oh, quote the Raven," I still have 5 and 6-year-old go, "Nevermore," and I'm like, "Where'd you get that?" "Oh, the Munsters." I'm like, Poe has been pervasive pretty much throughout 200 years almost, and one of the reasons is because he wrote so iconically. And so next week I'm doing a couple of different things. Next week outdoors in Abbott Square, I'm going to be presenting, we called it a lecture just to call it something different, but I'm actually going to physically take you on a treasure hunt using the gold bug, which is one of my personal favorites of Poe's stories. And we're going to do some dowsing, and we're going to do some idiomotor response and things like that. It's kind of a fun way to look at Poe as opposed. And then the week after, I'm going to be doing a magic show. There's a comedy horror show. It's taking like all of the grotesqueries and the things that Poe writes about that we're all so afraid of. He picked the things that cause fear in us, and with all that, I'm going to use them all in one show to the point where it's funny. I'm going to make Poe I'm going to make Poe family friendly. No small task, just so you know. And that being the case, I'd like to present one little piece about basically to show how Poe obfuscated the language. I'm not going to use Poe's language, but I'm going to just demonstrate how that would happen. And I have a lovely young assistant to come help me. I think he's still here. Hello, lovely young assistant. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good to see you. How convenient. He just happens to be the next speaker, too. Okay. So, I'm a coin collector. In this case, I've collected nickels. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the chance to pick up some nickels. Okay? Just grab a few, and I'm going to do the same.
All right.
Okay. I gotta count mine, and then I can tell you all kinds of cool stuff about yours.
Shall I count mine?
It's up to you.
All right. We have not rehearsed it.
Oh, wow. How weird. I'm going to take a couple more. Okay, so what I can say about this is I have as many as you have. Statement number 1. I have as many as you have plus 3 more. And I have as many as you have plus 3 more, and with enough left over to equal $1.10. That's the languaging part. So, if you will, we'll count yours into the thing one at a time.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7. That it?
That's it.
Okay, so you had 7.
I had 7.
That would make it 35 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I said I had as many as you, plus 3 more.
Mm-hmm.
So far, so good. And enough left over to make it, well, plus 3 more would have made it 50 cents?
50 cents.
And enough left over to equal $1. So that's 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, $1. $1.10. Just like I said, $1.10. I remember I said $1.10 first, and then I lost it in the middle. What this is representative of is how Poe obfuscates the language all of the time. He starts a story about, well, let's say, he talks about the difference between checkers and chess players, and why that's, what's different about chess versus checkers in a story that has absolutely nothing to do with checkers and chess. The end, we end up in a place with a a killer orangutan with a razor blade, or a straight razor. The other one that this sort of represents, and we'll come up with a bigger version of this for next week's show, is the not murder, the other one. He goes on, Fall of the House Usher, where he starts the thing by comparing analysts and calculation. And calculating is not analysis. And that's exactly what this is about, is we start by saying, I'll have the same number as you, and then we start talking about how much it's worth. And so it totally obfuscates the same number and stuff. And some of you, it's a great trick, and I probably should have done it better, but that being the case, next week's stuff will be a much bigger and more my venue as a performer. I know I'm kind of staying restricted. This is the downside of not seeing what I'm doing. I'm staying in the frame and all that kind of stuff for the TV people. Next week we're going to be outside at Abbott Square, so it's going to be big and strange. And I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you come on out, because I really think this is one of the best projects we've done in Santa Cruz in a long time. And so I would invite you to come and bring your friends. Thanks.
Writers are not only writers of fiction, they're writers of nonfiction, and we have wonderful writers of nonfiction in Santa Cruz, and I'm pleased to be able to introduce one of them right now to you. Besides being a sorcerer's apprentice, John Moir writes about science, and he particularly writes about the environment. The environment's something that Poe was very interested in. The other thing that Poe did was he used birds a lot in his writing. And that makes John one of the perfect people to participate in the big read. You probably know about his book, Return of the Condor, the story of bringing back the California condor and its current state in California and what we can expect in the future for it. So today, he's going to generalize and talk about birds and Poe. I'd like to introduce John Moir.
I'm still salivating from that lemon that Brent had going for us. Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks to all of you for turning out today. And thanks to all the people who made our first Santa Cruz Read possible. May we have many more of these events in the future. I'm going to give you a brief preview tonight of a talk that I'm going to do later in the month. And I thought I would start by telling you a story. My wife and I recently did a major remodel on our house. And for those of you who have ever embarked on one of those kind of adventures, you know that one of the things it forces you to do is to go into places you would never go into and clean them out. One of the things I was cleaning out just a couple of weeks ago, I went through this closet and I found a book. Maybe some of you have seen this book. This is a favorite of my son's when he was a kid, and it's called The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. I love this tale because it turns the traditional story of the Three Little Pigs on its head, and it retells this story from the point of view of the big bad wolf. It turns out that the big bad wolf had a terrible head cold that day, which explains or accounts for all of that huffing and puffing. And it was, just really too bad that he happened to blow down a few houses and eat a couple of pigs in what happened. And it was really just a bit of a misunderstanding of what happened. I saw this book and I thought, this might be a way to introduce what I'm going to be talking about with the big read, which is the way that Edgar Allan Poe used birds in his work. And what I'm going to do, like this book did, is to try to tell the rest of the story. Now, birds are found frequently in Poe's work, often as symbols. He likes to use vultures and ravens and even condors. He uses these birds often as symbols of death or of darkness. You don't have to go but 2 paragraphs into the Telltale Heart before you got the narrator of this story talking about the vulture eye, which is driving him literally crazy. And it's the vulture eye that drives the narrative of this story. He uses vultures again in a sonnet that he wrote about science. It's called Sonnet to Science, where he decries the effect that science is having on the arts. And what does he use as a symbol of science? A vulture. And of course, the Raven, perhaps his best-known poem, certainly the poem that got him going as a writer, got him recognized as a writer. And again, the Raven is used as a symbol, almost a demon-like symbol in that poem. Well, since I've done a lot of writing about birds, and particularly vultures, and especially the California condor, I was asked to be part of the big read. And so let me say up front, yes, it's true. Vultures and ravens, they eat dead things. And yes, it's true, they are associated with death. But there's, like the big bad wolf, there's more to their story. Vultures and ravens are highly intelligent birds. They're highly social birds. It's not easy to be a vulture. They're very gentle creatures. They don't kill anything. Something has to die before they can eat. So they're really at the whim, at the mercy of external events. They won't harm you unless you're dead. I think one of the reasons that Poe's writing has endured is that he tells such a good story. And some of the other speakers alluded to this as well, that you look at the page and you see, it isn't like a modern novel where there's constant dialogue, but he tells a good story, and a good story carries a narrative. And in the same way, bringing back the California condor from the brink of extinction is a good story. And I will be, at the talk I do later in the month, I'll be talking about how a small band of scientists set out to rescue this bird from the very brink of extinction. They undertook a risky and highly controversial procedure to try to save this bird. It was wildly controversial, headlines in the LA Times, the New York Times, and they largely succeeded. I'll have rare photographs that will take you deep into condor country. I will share with you what it was like to try to save this bird, that in 1982, there was only 22 of these birds left in the world. I'll also include the latest information on the condor recovery, including information on lead bullet fragments left behind in hunter-shot game that are a huge problem for condors, ravens, vultures, and dozens of other species. And as I reported in Smithsonian Magazine not too long ago, they're also a danger to human health. I'll also be talking about a brand new development, another problem for the recovery of this bird, the emergence of an old nemesis, DDT. This pesticide that was banned nearly 40 years ago is still contaminating the waters off of our coastline, and I'll tell you how it is affecting condors and other birds that are feeding on some of the animals that are carrying this pesticide up the food chain. And I reported on this in the New York Times just a few months ago, this new conundrum that is facing the condor program. So if you would like to know the rest of the story about the birds that Edgar Allan Poe used in his work, I will be using his writing as a framework. And I'll be speaking on October the 27th at, I'll read here to make sure I get this right, at the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History. It'll be at 7:30 in the evening. And I'll be telling you the true story of vultures and ravens, and especially the heartwarming and hopeful story of a sometimes misunderstood but beautiful bird, our very own vulture, the California condor. Thank you.
Isn't this going to be a wonderful, whoops, I'm short. Isn't this going to be a wonderful month? I do want to tell you, since we're talking about birds, there's another great question that's going to be answered this month. You can have an opportunity to learn the difference between a crow and a raven, and you may have noticed, as I have, that there are more crows in Santa Cruz County now than certainly there were when I moved here. And if you come to the Live Oak Branch Library on October 22nd at 10 a.m. to a program called Big Black Birds, you will find out from Scott Smithson why there are so many more crows here, and you will be able to tell the difference between a crow and a raven. I'm just saying. There's lots, we have so many wonderful events planned. I want to tell you very quickly about a few of them, but the main thing for you to know is to find out where everything is happening, when everything is happening, what's being discussed this week. Check the website, www.santacruzreads.org, and it's written on the program that you picked up as you came in here. That will give you the most current information. You'll see what's happening there, but I just want to whet your appetite just a little bit more. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. On Friday, we're having a blood drive. We really are. Why not do something for the community? And it makes sense. On October 7th, we're going to have a blood drive at the Live Oak Branch Library. If you've been over there on Corcoran Lagoon, it's a lovely, tranquil place to be. And we're going to have library staff there reading stories to you and giving book talks while you give blood. So we're going to make it as lovely as we possibly can. A wonderful group of actors in Santa Cruz that I'm sure many of you know about is the Willing Suspension Armchair Theater. This is a group of actors who pick a topic and offer readers' theater to various groups. We've had them at the library several times to great acclaim and great enjoyment. They have put together an evening of Poe for us, and they're going to do it twice for us, October 13th at the Aptos branch and October 19th at the downtown branch. You don't want to miss them. They're always wonderful. Music, you're a musician. What has Poe got to say to you? I'll tell you. We have our very popular Munching with Mozart, a noontime concert once a month at the downtown branch. And this month, October 20th, there's going to be original music linked to Poe's poetry offered, and you don't want to miss that. Come early to get a seat, otherwise you'll be standing with everybody else in the hallway to hear the music. Now, if all this reading makes you kind of think about murder, there is actually a safe way to participate. There's going to be a Murder in the Library evening on October 22nd at the Scotts Valley Branch Library. It's a fundraiser for the Scotts Valley Friends, but it will be a safe way to follow any of those instincts that Poe may be awakening in you. We're going to participate, as I said earlier, with the Museum of Art and History at the Evergreen Cemetery in their annual Spooky Tales, and I do mean that there might be a surprise there. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, so you won't be really frightened because it's going to be a family event, but you might be surprised. Also on the 29th that evening, we have comedy. The Loose Cannon Improv Company is going to present a program at the Broadway Playhouse called Never Say Nevermore. And we have the details here and flyers up here on the table. And I do want to tell you, if you want to go, get your tickets early. The Playhouse is not big. It will sell out really fast. You don't want to miss it. We have a writing contest. I think I've mentioned that once or twice before. And you'll get to hear the winners of the writing contest on KUSP on Sunday, October 30th. At 9 p.m. So if you want to hear what your fellow citizens have written, that will be your opportunity. And of course, the first week in November is when Poe is coming to Santa Cruz. He's going to visit classrooms, and he's going to do a one-man show at the Santa Cruz High School Auditorium on November 1st. Other people may know him as Duffy Hudson, but that week that he's in Santa Cruz, he'll be Edgar Allan Poe. Now, of course, we're talking about a writer. So we're going to be discussing what he writes. And I really want to call your attention on the website to the whole area of the community discussion groups. Jory Post has put together 10 wonderful groups, each led by a very interesting and local writer or expert, if not on Poe, on writing, and willing to talk about different aspects. Each discussion group will be a different topic, so you want to look on the website to see what topic is coming up in the coming week. I will tell you that the very first one is Monday, October 3rd at the Downtown Library at 7 p.m. Don't worry, I know the building is technically closed, but we're going to have it open for you. And Dr. Virginia Coe is going to talk about the fall of the House of Usher. Her topic is entitled Language and Content of Poe. She will be the very first of our discussion leaders. And I want to remind you that Bookshop Santa Cruz is donating raffle prizes. There will be a raffle at each one of the sessions, and so you want to be sure to be in on that. So, santacruzreads.org. It's going to be a great month. And Sherry is going to close the event. I think the friends have, there she is. Okay. Sherry?
Before I let you go, I want to remind you that we are in a matching grant with the National Endowment for the Arts. So the Friends of the Santa Cruz Library have also provided funding for a lot of these events. Most of our presenters are volunteer, but Duffy Hudson, of course, we are bringing here and supporting him. We would love to have you join us as a member. We have a membership table out in the lobby. We provide over $200,000 pretty much every year in order to provide materials, programs, and other volunteer support. So if you're not a member, and in this county only 1% is, please consider joining us. Secondly, we do have a limited edition of posters that we will be selling in the bookshop in the Central Library. Please look for that if you're at all interested. They are absolutely gorgeous, big posters of the raven with the red slash behind it. And lastly, if you're interested in being a part of the contest for writing, please pick up the rules, the standards, the expectations off the front table. Thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the next month. Thank you.